If you were to change anything in terms of your approach or training thus far, what would that be?
And I wish I'd done it earlier because then I'd be more prepared.
And you never had that security issue as a concern?
Let me go back home and run it by my husband. I'm sure he's going to say no. And to my surprise, when I went, he said, no, go. This time to chor bhi so rahe hote hain.
I was always comfortable. I was never running in an area or in a place where I was uncomfortable.
घुटनों से डर नहीं लगता है?
आप खड़े होके and you start walking the other way, they will just lose, focus. The
And
dog.
some of them have run with us actually.
Right.
So yeah.
And morning runs, living in a city like Karachi, is difficult to manage on a Saturday.
I have compromised many date nights, and my husband's like, so what should we do? Where should we go? And I'm like, no, it's Friday.
2 साल पहले, I would not have been able to sit like this. I would have been slouching in this chair, probably off to sleep when other people are talking.
Do you guys run with music or without music?
I am a music buff.
Sometimes when you're very tired and you're alone, then the music, I would say, does help.
It is something that is not advisable in traffic. But I still do it.
Hello and welcome to the fourth part of the Karachi Marathon series. हम बात कर रहे हैं कराची के अंदर एक बहुत बड़ा मैराथन होने वाला है जनवरी 5 को, और इस मैराथन में तकरीबन 200 से 300 लोग पार्टिसिपेट कर रहे हैं जो 42 किलोमीटर भागेंगे. अब क्यों भागेंगे ये मैं पिछले 3 एपिसोड से समझने की कोशिश कर रहा हूँ कि किस वजह से लोग 42 किलोमीटर भागना चाहते हैं. तो मेरे पास 3 और लोग मौजूद हैं, 2 brand new runners और एक seasoned runner that will explain to you why Karachi Marathon is their first choice of running this year, जबकि पूरी दुनिया में marathons होते हैं, they can go and access those. So let's start the conversation with them and let's figure out what their journey has been. And we'll start with Reena. How are you, Reena?
I'm good, thank you, Fazan.
So walk me through, this is your first time running a long distance. And you mentioned you started training in July. What drew you to signing up for the Karachi Marathon?
So it's an interesting question. I know usually people, their first choice wouldn't be Karachi, they'd go somewhere else, right? But for me, because I have a lot of friends here and there and they've run marathons. And one friend said something to me and it stuck. She said, Reena, why not from your hometown? And that struck a chord with me, honestly. She's like, you'll wake up in your own bed, your family will be there. You don't have to be nervous. I mean, that already is kicking in, right? And that just struck a chord with me. And it stuck with me as well. And that's when I thought, you know what, I'm going to sign up for this. Because I was up for the challenge. I wanted to do this. It was on my bucket list, so to speak. Yeah. And I just went out there and did it.
That sounds very logical. Most people leave and they're jet lagged, new city, new environment. I mean, it's so much more convenient to just do it in the city you've grown up in, right? And was it the same reason for you, Maria?
No, for me it's different. Like I said, I came to running because I wanted to lose weight, and then this whole community aspect kicked in. Everybody running with me was doing the Karachi Marathon, and I had come back because I had just given birth to a baby, and I had come back and I wanted to become more fit, but along the way it became something I really started enjoying. And for me it became, oh, if I can go to this finish line, the kind of example that I set for myself and for my children. In fact, it's interesting, at the finish line, I do imagine my daughters there and I do want them to see me finishing. And that just keeps me moving. And that just keeps me, even despite the pain, despite getting up so early, for me, it's like, I need to get to that finish line because I need to meet my daughters there and I need to set that example for myself and for them. And if I can do this, imagine what all can I do in life. So yeah, that's been pushing me.
Right, Umair, you're a seasoned runner. You run in my neighborhood, I run in your neighborhood, we live in the same neighborhood.
Yeah, we do.
And I've been seeing you run for years. You've already run some marathons.
I've run 2. Yeah.
You've run 2.
Yeah.
And you're doing a 3rd one. Yeah. Your motivation to run your first marathon was very different. Walk me through that motivation.
So, मेरे साथ ये हुआ था कि 2013 के अंदर I had gone through some, कुछ हुआ था मेरे साथ कि my leg muscles had completely atrophied. I was bedridden for about 4 months. And it took me quite a while to get back, to get, physical rehab or ye sari ke baad. And it took me a bit of time to actually get up and start walking normally again. तो उसके बाद खैर वो हो गया, that got done, and I started gaining a bit of weight after that because I wasn't very active. So the initial point of any kind of activity was to just lose a little bit of weight, and I started walking to lose weight. And I lost quite a bit of weight just by walking. But the running part of it was mainly because of that whole experience in 2013, and I wanted to end up doing 42.2 kilometers running with those same legs that couldn't walk about 100 meters. And that I managed to do that 10 years later.
Wow.
I managed to do it in Istanbul in 2022. I went.
Wow.
And I cramped up a lot.
Yeah.
But yeah, I got that done.
How did that feel when you crossed that finish line?
It was, I called my wife up and I said, यार 10 साल पहले मैं चल नहीं सकता था और आज मैंने मैराथन खत्म किया. 1-2 गालियाँ भी दी थी मैंने. लेकिन मैंने मैराथन खत्म किया.
हाँ, अक्सर लोगों का पहला जो रिएक्शन होता है खत्म करने का, there's tears and there's naturally they cry.
Yeah, but it was for me, obviously it's a very emotional moment because there's a lot of hard work that goes into training for a marathon, and it's a crapshoot. The day can just go bad.
Right.
You can have bad weather.
Yeah.
You could be jet lagged, or you could just be sick.
Cramps.
Yeah. So you've been training for something for about 4 or 5 months, and then that day just might not be your day.
Right.
So when you finishing, when you see the finish line, it's very emotional.
Right.
Also, the cramps. You know that the cramps are going to stop now that I'm going to cross the line.
Yeah.
So वो भी एक बड़ा वो होता है. But for me, it was like, यार, I did this, and it was great. And then the next aim was कि अब यार मुझे cramp नहीं होना. So for the next one that I did, and I managed to do that without cramping.
Right.
So that's kind of the process. That's why I run marathons. And it's probably something that I would like to do for as long as I can.
Right.
And yeah, so that's why it's just for me, there's a lot more passion for the sport, and for reasons like this. Yeah.
So I'm going to come back to Reena and Mariam. There's a perception that Karachi is not a safe city. ठीक है, और फिर इसी शहर में हम सड़क पे निकल के भागें, ये इसका एक और नेगेटिव परसेप्शन है. एंड इट मेक्स इट इवन हार्डर अगर जो भाग रहा है वो एक औरत है जो भाग रही है. हाउ डिड यू डील विद दैट परसेप्शन? क्योंकि यू केम विद अ डिफरेंट पर्सपेक्टिव कि यार आई वांट टू ट्राई समथिंग डिफरेंट. जो दूसरे एक्टिविटीज में यू वर इन्वॉल्व वो तो इंडोर एक्टिविटीज थी.
बिल्कुल.
You came with a different perspective कि I just had a baby, मुझे थोड़ा weight loss करना है. Weight loss करने के बहुत आसान तरीके हैं, मैं बता देता हूँ. इतनी मेहनत करने की ज़रूरत नहीं, ना बाहर भागने की ज़रूरत है. तो मुझे ये जो security का और जो safety का element है, especially as women living in the city, इसको किस तरह overcome किया? And how did your family react to it? And how did the running community support you?
So I love that you asked how did your family react to it, right? Because my husband is always very concerned. Like whenever I wake up in the morning, he's like, text me when you get there, tell me what's happening, where are you running? So sometimes it's Ramada, sometimes we go on Seaview, sometimes it's the park as well. So there have been, I've had to break barriers because he's like, oh my God, you're going so early. It's still dark. Slowly and steadily, I think, and the good thing is, the community keeps meeting up. They have these races, they have these runs. Like there's one coming up next week as well, which we spoke about. And he comes there to, support, cheer, and he's met the community. And I love that you brought that in because honestly, Faizan, being a woman, it was a concern for us as well. I think generally also I have a fear of driving late at night, We're scared, we hear incidents, we look at it. Sometimes we've been a victim as well. But I think the community has been super strong because when we message on the group, there's always somebody or the other who says, we'll be running there, we'll go with you, or we'll be there. And I think when I started in July, there were so many people who just wouldn't leave us alone. There'd be all of us running together and they'd convince us, they'd, give us that comfort that don't worry. Because honestly, when I started, I couldn't even run a 5K. I would be jogging and walking. So Faisal, who's my coach as well, and there's so many others, they stuck by us. And I know it's painful going at that pace when you're such a, you're a fast runner. You don't want to go at that pace. But I think it's the community, and eventually we got to that level. So it's always that. Like today also we had a long run. Just put a message on the group, somebody or the other will be there to, sort of support you and walk you through it as well.
And you never had that security issue as a concern?
To be honest, no. It's always there, being in Pakistan, but I think the community has pulled through. We've been safe. And again, if something happens, I think everybody has come together to kind of, make us feel safe. And that's what it is.
How about for you, Mariam?
So for me, I remember I came to running also because Kaukab is my inspiration. We work together. And I remember standing at her desk and she said, "Aa jao kal." And I said, "Are you crazy? Like 5 a.m.?" And I'm somebody who never drives very early in the morning or after Maghrib when it's dark. Because my husband is very like, okay, be careful, go with the driver, don't go alone. And I said, "Kaukab, let me go back home and run it by my husband. I'm sure he's going to say no." And to my surprise, when I went, he said, "No, go. Is time to chor bhi so rahe hote hain." He's like, and I was so surprised for somebody like him who's always telling me, "Nahi, yahan nahi jao, wahan nahi jao, be careful." And he said, "Go." And that was very reassuring. But of course, एक होता है कहना and एक होता है actually me stepping out, and it was actually scary in the beginning. But then एक दो दफा and you're like, it's like those barriers you keep breaking.
Yeah.
And for me, I just broke that barrier.
Yeah.
And in fact, we'd also gotten a new car and I was not comfortable driving
Yeah.
it. He said, "This is perfect time, Mariam. Subah leke jao, get comfortable with the car,
Right.
with all of it, because there's absolutely
Yeah.
nobody on the road." And then I started showing up, and I think the other ladies that are also coming, for me, it's like, oh, Reena also drives alone, Hina also drives alone, Falan also drives alone. So if they can, why can't I?
Right.
So yeah, then it's just 2-3 times and then you pass that barrier, right?
Right, that's
Yeah.
true.
Yeah.
And Umair, you're doing the morning runs. You run at different times of the day, I've seen. Mostly morning though.
Mostly morning.
Mostly morning.
For me, the security thing for me, because it was such an incremental thing for me, it never really came up. I started running in a park for a very long time.
ठीक है.
फिर उसके बाद मैं बोर हो गया पार्क से.
हाँ.
पार्क से बाहर निकल आए.
ये मसला है.
नेबरहुड में भागना शुरू कर दिया. नेबरहुड में भी बोर हो गए. थोड़ा सा दूर निकल आए. So it was just an incremental process of me increasing my distance and also increasing the area that I was running in. So it was just always, I was always comfortable. I was never running in an area or in a place where I was uncomfortable. And then I started meeting people on the road, other fellow runners. And that's how I got, I got in touch with a few people. एक मेरा बहुत अच्छा दोस्त है नवीद पलेक. He introduced me to our running group, CV runners, and he said, "Why don't you just come and start running with us?" And I was like, "Acha, okay, I'll do that." And that's when I started running with the group. And then when you're running in a group, then the security thing, it becomes a much less of a concern, especially if there are about 10 people running with you or 15 people running with you. So that's how, for me, that was never ever really, मुझे कभी ऐसा नहीं लगा कि यार मुझे डर लग रहा है कि यार मैं यहाँ क्यों रात को भाग रहा हूँ या बहुत अर्ली मॉर्निंग भाग रहा हूँ. कभी मुझे ऐसा लगा नहीं.
कुत्ते भी होते हैं सड़कों पे.
कुत्ते भी होते हैं.
मैंने तो किसी और से नहीं पूछा ये. मैंने कहा ये आप लोगों से पूछ लो. You guys are new to this. कुत्तों से डर नहीं लगता है?
तो कुत्तों से शुरू में तो वाकई में डर लगा था. लेकिन then I started realizing कि अगर मैं खड़ा हो जाऊँ, and this is actually a public service message, कि ये जो stray कुत्ते होते हैं, unless and until they're in like 15-16 का pack, then you should just, you should start praying or something. But if it's एक कुत्ता है या दो कुत्ते हैं, अगर आप खड़े हो जाएं और उसके तो वो भी खड़ा हो जाएगा. And invariably आप खड़े होके and you start walking the other way, they'll just lose, focus.
And some of them have run with us actually.
Right.
So yeah,
and it has now gotten to a point where some of these dogs recognize me.
Right.
And they're like, यार ये तो हर दफा गुजरता है, इसने कुछ नहीं करना है. मेरा नाम, he's not a threat. Yeah. And I've realized that this dog is not a threat either. But yes, when it's a pack of dogs, then you should be careful. Especially if it's in some territorial dispute with some other pack of dogs and you're in the middle of that. Then you should worry कि यार ये crossfire में आप
मारे जाएंगे.
But yeah, so you should change your direction at that time. But if it's a couple of dogs,
वो manage हो जाता
है.
Have you dealt with stray dogs, Mariam?
No, but I'm very scared of dogs. But सबने मुझे रीअश्योर किया कि ये कुछ नहीं कहते, ऑनेस्टली कभी ऐसा इंसिडेंट हुआ भी नहीं. So yeah, I'm
And you?
yeah.
I'm a little bit scared, but you know what? When I saw other people are more fearful, I toned
Yeah.
down. And exactly to Mel's point, I think, you know, if you just do your thing,
Yeah.
ignore them. And honestly, I've seen them even running with us, so it's
Yeah.
pretty reassuring. So I'm hoping they're cheering for us on the Karachi Marathon.
No, it's been interesting. Like, so for when I run, like if I see, I've had dogs chase me,
Oh.
you know, so even though I did the stop move.
Oh, they still chased you?
Yeah, he just came at me. He'd started his run. I did the stop, but he was in momentum. At which point I was like, I need to do something. So when I started my run, तो मैं फिर पलट के मैंने कहा मैं भाग क्यों रहा हूँ? I should just turn around. तो मैं I turned around and I scared the dog. I just screamed at the dog and the dog freaked out. So the dog ran away. That was a bit of a risky move. उसके बाद से मैंने कहा कि ठीक है यार, this strategy I should not employ. फिर मैंने क्या, मुझे stray कुत्ता नजर आता है ना, तो I just changed the route. एक दफा क्या हुआ, the strangest thing happened. I saw 2 stray dogs. I changed my route before they even saw me. I thought so. फिर क्या हुआ? They came one to my left, one to my right, and they started running with me
Oh my God.
from where we live, off of Moment, all the way down in front of my house.
Wow.
They just ran right next to me, and at that point, I'm like, I don't know if they're my security.
Yeah, your
ये
guard dogs.
मुझे काटने वाले हैं. मतलब, it was a little unnerving. So I went inside my house. They went and they sat outside the house. For the next 15 minutes, I had to cut my run short. मैंने कहा मुझे समझ नहीं आ रही ये हुआ क्या है.
They were probably used to some other runner who was probably feeding them something.
Possibly.
They were like, यार ये भी देगा.
ये भी देगा कुछ.
और ये तो अंदर ही चला.
ये तो अंदर चला गया. तो मेरी रन भी आउट हो गई. मैंने कहा यार ये पार्ट ऑफ ट्रेनिंग जो है मुझे किसी ने कम्युनिटी में नहीं दी है कि how do you manage the dog situation यार. You know, especially where we run.
I think 9 times out of 10,
Yeah.
if there is a dog that is barking at you,
Yeah.
if you stop and you just kind of like look at him,
Yeah,
he'll just turn away.
that's true. But we'll come to the more interesting side of it. Ab isme you mentioned the morning runs, right? Morning runs, living in a city like Karachi, is difficult to manage on a Saturday because it's not your morning. Your 2-hour run is costing your family 24 hours. If you look at it from one perspective, it can be a little selfish. Why? Because पिछले शाम 7 बजे से आपने तैयारी करनी है. What you eat at night, फिर आपने जल्दी सोना है. आप पहले सो रहे हैं सबसे, फिर बच्चे उठे हुए हैं, the husband or the wife is awake, whatever. And then you wake up in the morning, now suddenly their night is ruined because they're worried कि यार ये सुबह पहुंच गए, नहीं पहुंचे, क्या हुआ. You do your very long run, you come back completely drained. You're more and more of a vegetable for the rest of the Saturday. So now you've just cost 24 hours of the people around you for 2 hours of fun for yourself. Is that fair?
Do I have to go first?
We'll put you in the spotlight.
Yes, okay. So it was as if he was speaking on my behalf because I have compromised many date nights and my husband's like, so what should we do? Where should we go? And I'm like, no, it's Friday. I need to do carb loading.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty psycho about my birthday, by the way, right? I'm so big on it. But this time, the next day I had a half marathon. I'm like, no, I need to do carb loading. I need to sleep. And I think, you know, again, Faizan, it comes down to you setting the tone also and really talking it out. So my husband is very clear. He knows that this is something I want to do. I know for now it's 6 months. I love doing it, but I know it won't be at the same intensity. So he's also realized that, okay, let her do her thing for these 6 months. I'm sure he's seeing also the positives of it. There are pros and cons, so you're right. You're pretty much a vegetable for the rest of the day. But then also, having said that, I think, you know, how they say, if you don't fill your cup, you don't have enough to give around as well. So I think I'm more happier because I'm able to do this. And again, to echo what Mariam said, that finish line and having my family, my son seeing this, and, you know, my mom and my sisters and all of that, I think that's going to bring me a lot of joy and just ticking that thing off my list. And for the greater good, I know this is a sacrifice for the family or in the moment, but I think it'll leave a bigger impact on them and myself as well.
Yeah.
So often when I'm driving to work, you know, it's funny you mentioned that tear.
Yeah.
I can totally picture and visualize myself crying like a little baby. But again, they're tears of joy.
Yeah.
And this 6 months, hopefully, I'll make it up to him.
Yeah.
All the date nights that I've compromised and the early sleeping. But funny, before we go to Mariam, I do want to say this. I used to make fun of him. He'd be like this early riser, and quick to sleep. And I'd be like, you're such a loser. What's wrong with you? Why are you sleeping? Let's watch a movie. Let's do this. And now he's like, the tables have turned. What's going on?
Yeah.
But yeah, it is what it is. But I'm very, very grateful for his support.
Right.
And I'm glad that I can do this as
Right.
well.
Yeah, you can't do it without the support of the family. How does it? I mean, you've got 2 kids and you've got young kids.
Yeah.
मतलब 24 घंटे का compromise है ये.
Yeah, so I feel like it fits so well into my life. I'll still say that. I didn't feel that much of a sacrifice. Yes, my husband, but in a way it also works for him, and I'll tell you how. Because we've been trying to push the bedtime and वो हम काफ़ी अरसे से नहीं कर पा रहे थे, and then the morning is very difficult because you're like उठो and उसे उठा नहीं जा रहा for school. But because I also need to sleep early, so everything works in a way that 8:39 we are in bed, and the kids only sleep when I go to sleep. So हम सब सो जाते हैं, and that gives him time to go do his run, which he was also skipping because वो हमारी चीज़ momentum बन ही नहीं रहा था, and the kids would sleep late, and then the park closes at 10 o'clock, that it doesn't give him that kind of time. So he's also happy, I'm also happy. And like Reena said कि उसका spillover इतना ज़्यादा है because they can notice this change in you, and that because your well-being is more intact now, right? And your cup is more full, and there's more joy, and even the morning is much happier now. And I don't feel like a vegetable. Somehow I feel like I'm more energetic when I go back, and I feel like I'm more present for my children. And even all of it, like even जो घर जाके बच्चों को तैयार करने वाला जो होता है, because the minute you come back you have to get into that mode. I'm enjoying that mode. And also like until last year मेरी सुबह जो होती थी ना सारी on my laptop होती थी. I'd wake up early. I've always been an early riser, but I never used to invest that time on myself. I'd again, in that corporate thing that you get stuck, my laptop खोल के 5 बजे से शुरू हो जाती थी. And I'm so glad that I've broken that, and I'm giving this time to myself. So for him, he's also seeing that ये time ये जो ये laptop पे लगाती थी, she's now giving it to herself, and he can see like a much more present person, a much more happier person. Because I think it's a mom thing. I don't know if you guys can relate or not, but the first time I had my baby, I saw my well-being really going because I was COVID and it was my first child. So he's seen that part also. And this time with the second one, he's seen a very different person in a very different journey. So he's much more supportive. Of course, the date nights, the Friday night, the late night, binge watching, all of that has gone. But I think everybody's okay with it because it works for our family.
Because it works. Yeah. And you're the seasoned guy in the room.
Yeah, well,
तुमने तुम्हारी family को तो आदत पड़ गई.
It helps. It also helps if your wife is as antisocial as you are. Then it's just, I mean, we don't really meet anyone anyway.
Right.
So, no, but honestly though, shuru mein, yes, it is very taxing, especially the day afterwards.
Right.
But when you start running regularly, like I've just done about close to about 3 hours of running in the morning today. And 2 saal pehle I would not have been able to sit like this. I would have been slouching in this chair, probably off to sleep when other people are talking. But now it's because I've been doing it regularly for such a long time, it's not as exhausting as it was.
Your body gets used to it.
Get used to it. So that's the silver lining for you guys. But also, you're not training at that intensity throughout the year. So it's not as if you were doing like super long 3-hour runs like every week for like 12 months. It's not that's not the case, at least not for me. I try to target 1 marathon a year, which I feel is very doable. So initially जब आप शुरू करते हैं मैराथन ट्रेनिंग तो आपको 4 महीने देने पड़ते हैं, सॉलिड 4 महीने देने पड़ते हैं जिसमें आपको because it's a slower build.
अगर आप जीरो से स्टार्ट
कर रहे हैं, लेकिन as you become consistent in running regularly, you're doing a decent amount of mileage every month. So the marathon block itself kind of like shortens to maybe like 12 weeks. And honestly, it's not that much of a problem. I mean, yes, you are sacrificing a little bit, but like I said, you're not as exhausted as you once were before initially. And also, I think your family just gets used to it as well. And we start doing stuff. मतलब कि हम लोग पहले Friday nights अगर हम पहले कुछ करते थे, we just shifted that to Saturday nights. And initially ये हुआ कि जी वो Saturday night पर उमैर साहब जो हैं वो किसी के घर में किसी के couch पर सो रहे हैं. This has happened, but not anymore. So
So you got to keep at it. सालों तक भागते रहें तो आप
तो
जागते
फिर आप
रहेंगे.
सोएंगे नहीं रात को.
नहीं. अब इसमें मुझे जो especially for the two of you, this is a new activity, and we are now in December. Let's say, how did you see your motivation levels vary over the last 4 months in terms of commitment towards this activity?
So for me, like I said, पहले तो मैं 1 किलोमीटर भी नहीं भाग पा रही थी. पहले दिन मैं गई, मैं जाके पेवमेंट पे गिर गई. I injured both my knees and I was like, what the hell? And my husband said, come, I'll buy you new shoes. And he took me because he's always been like super motivated. नहीं, तुमने अच्छी चीज उठाई है, be consistent at it, do it. And then it was like, ठीक है. And I hadn't even signed up. Like people signed up way earlier, right? For me, it was like, let's see कहाँ तक हम जाते हैं. And I wasn't as gung-ho as other people who had joined with me who said, oh, हम भागेंगे, ये वो, etc. And they dropped out. But for me, it was just like, I just need to show up every day. And I just need to be consistent at it. And August 14 की जो रेस हुई थी, and उसमें 7K था, और मुझे रात में नींद आनी बंद हो गई. And I'm like, Okab, I can't do this. Faisal, I can't do this. And he's like, आप कर लोगे, आप कर लोगे. उन्होंने एक दिन पहले Greeno 5K हमें कराया. He's like, ये हो गया तो कल 7K भी हो जाएगा. And it's only when I did that 7K, I think my motivation really shifted. I would say I became very serious at it post August 14 की जो रेस थी. Because एक वो barrier टूटा of running, आए चुंदरीगढ़ पे, and I saw how many people showed up there. And I was just like, I can do this. If I can, from not being able to run even till here to 7K, then I can really make it. And my motivation each day. And वही वाली बात होती है, every time you reach a new milestone, you're like, oh, you know, अब मैंने 5 कर लिया, अब मैंने 10 कर लिया, अब मैंने 15. And it's like this nasha that I want to do a 21, and I want to push to do a 30, and then I want to push to do a 42. So it becomes this, and the runner's high is actually very, very true. Because when I come back, I'm so high. I feel like I also don't feel like a vegetable because I'm in that high that entire day. And yeah, for me, it's that. It's just
मतलब वो the accomplishment of a new milestone. उसकी जो high होती है, that in itself is the motivation. How about for you?
So for me, slightly different, but my motivation primarily was because this was something I wanted to do for myself. So I had decided, and I'm usually someone, if I set my mind to it, I don't give up, right? I push even if I'm dying. So very different to Mariam. Sometimes I am like a vegetable, I won't lie, when especially the long runs. So I want to sound like a realist as well, because honestly, it sounds all fancy, but there are painful days. There are moments when I hear this little voice in my head saying, why am I doing this? What have I put myself into? You know, I question it. So there are ups and downs. And again, I think Mariam would relate to this as well, because full-time job, mother, and then I've gone and put myself in an extra course that I'm doing, and it's quite intense, right? So I tend to think, why, what? But then again, you know, there's so much joy that comes from it, because when you go do this, you feel good. I've met wonderful people through running. I think a beautiful community. I've made some fantastic friends. And yeah, I'd keep doing it again.
Amazing. If you were to change anything in terms of your approach or training thus far, what would that be?
I'll go first. I feel like I went to strength training very, very late. And Faisal would keep saying कि मेरी classes को seriously लो, the core cadence, etc. And I was like, God, like you said, इतना time मैं already निकाल रही हूँ, मैं 1 घंटा और निकालूँ, वो भी सुबह, because the class is 8 to 9, and that's when I have to get the kids ready.
और ये separate class है strength training की, तो ये running नहीं है.
नहीं. So you really have to, because, and it's only when the long distances started, I actually realized that my legs aren't ready. And while mentally I want to go further, but the pain isn't letting me. And it's so bad that limping start ho gayi hai. And that's when I signed up for the classes. And I've started very, very late. And I wish I'd done it earlier, because then I'd be more prepared. And I wouldn't have to go through this journey.
ये बड़ा important fact है कि भाई लोग running शुरू कर लेते हैं, लेकिन अगर strength training साथ में नहीं चल रही हो, and you don't want to overdo the strength training, because that also then takes away from the recovery time, because you need to have the long distance run. Good point. How about for you?
So for me, I joined from the get-go, because I have a couple of friends who've run marathons, and you know, I had heard from them that injury is a thing. And I'm very scared of that. I'm someone, if I'm in pain, I won't even take a tablet. I'll pull through it. I don't like just popping pills, right? So I didn't want to get myself in that position. So I started from the very get-go when Faisal started offering those classes. And I was also taking some strength training otherwise. Then I cut down because I noticed that sleep is very important. So my performance changes massively if I'm, if I'm well rested, if I've had a good night's sleep. And the last thing I will say, Faizan, honestly, which I was taking very lightly, I eat whatever's at home, zyada focus nahi. But I think something, and again, the eggs part, right? I'm not a big egg person, but again, Faisal will be like, oh, my cook hates me. I eat 14 eggs, and I'm like, 14? Okay, I can do 2 or 3. I can't do 14, but yeah. So I switched that. So I take my breakfast really seriously. So I started investing in proper food, wholesome meals. So yeah, I think that's what changed for me, really.
Umair?
Well, strength training is always something that I don't think you can do enough of that, actually, to be honest. If you really want to get faster, you need to work on whatever your weak areas are. And for everybody, it's something different. So, targeting those areas and improving, just strengthening the muscles around that area, whether it's a joint, whether it's a ligament, tendon, whatever. That is something that, I have been guilty of neglecting. And I have paid a price for that in races and even in training. The other thing is that if you manage to even catch an injury and, ज़्यादातर या तो ये हो कि आपने कोई ऐसी इंजरी है जो सडनली आपने ट्विस्ट कर लिया अपने टांग को या कुछ को, वो तो आपको इमीडिएटली पता चल जाएगी. जो ओवर यूज इंजरीज होती हैं बिकॉज यू बीन डूइंग अ लॉट ऑफ माइलेज वगैरह, दे क्रीप अप ऑन यू and you start feeling a tightness in your somewhere in your knee or something of that sort. And I've been guilty of ignoring those signs until it's become a full-blown injury. And thankfully, it hasn't gone to a point where I've had to take out an extensive amount of time. But that is something that I'm now much more mindful of. And कि यार अगर थोड़ा सा भी कुछ हो रहा है तो you take those couple of days off, do the compression, ice, all of that. Be a little bit more conservative. It'll just go away. But if you persist with it, it might just become a full-blown injury. And I've despite the fact that I even know this right now, I'm still guilty of कि मैं कर लेता हूँ ये कि यार नहीं यार ये अभी निकल जाएगा, ये भाग लेते हैं इसमें, बिकॉज ये वाला इजी रन अगर मैंने मिस कर दिया तो मैं तो
but it ends up costing you. But it ends up costing.
And it's also important to do it with somebody. There has to be a plan. There has to be somebody trained to give you a plan. एक होता है ना लोग freestyle, वो भाग रहा है इतना मैं इतना भाग लूँ. This is also a wrong approach.
Structured होना चाहिए.
Structured होना चाहिए with somebody who understands, and then you say मुझे यहाँ दर्द हो रहा है ये वो, and that person sort of guides कि ये इसलिए हो रहा है, glutes activated नहीं है, hamstrings activated नहीं है. It's all a science, right? And the more you do it, you realize कि नहीं यार, there has to be supervision and there has to be a coach with you. ऐसे आप अगर if you're a new runner like us, you just can't start like that.
And also like आपने 1.5 घंटे की रन कर ली है लेकिन आप उसके बाद 5 मिनट आप जो है वो स्ट्रेचिंग नहीं कर रहे हैं. Why not? It's just another 5 or 6 minutes. People neglect that, and I personally I neglected a lot, and I shouldn't. That is something that I will definitely, a proper warm up and a proper cool down, and some mobility work. I mean, it doesn't take a lot of time. It might take maybe another 15 minutes of your day. But it goes a long way in preventing injury.
That's true. Stretching is critical.
It's critical. It really is. And a lot of people neglected it, including me.
Yeah.
And that's something that, it's always on my bucket list कि यार ये करना है.
It's the 5 most important minutes in your entire run.
It really is.
Before and after, actually.
Yes. And, it makes a huge difference when it comes to preventing injury.
Yeah, that's true.
Especially as you get older.
Do you guys run with music or without music?
I love this question. I am a music buff, okay? And it's funny because when I joined Faisal's class and under his supervision, I asked this question. I said, hey, what about music, So he's like, no music. And I'm like, what? Why? And he told me through his experience, because obviously we've got a seasoned runner right here. In these international marathons, it doesn't work, right? Because people are like, running, they might be saying something to you, you might be in the way, you can't have your headphones on. And honestly, again, in a place like Pakistan, and we spoke about this earlier, right? Sometimes the traffic can be, and there are no rules really. Somebody might decide, oh, let me take a left or let me go from here. I think it is a very big risk. And even though I'm a big music buff, but like I said, I think the community helps. Because when you're running, and sometimes we're told, run at a conversational pace. So we're talking and really we don't even know where the time went by. So it's interesting. So I've dropped my headphones when I'm alone and in the park, then I put them on. I'll admit to that. But yeah, on the road, absolutely, it's a no-no.
It's a no-no.
Yeah.
What about you?
I think same. When I'm alone, I like music, but even that I started dropping because the entire morning run and when the sun comes up, I've started finding it so beautiful, and I love how I can spend time with my thoughts and with myself. And उस time मैं तस्बीह कर लेती हूँ, मैं कोई और चीज़ कर लेती हूँ. And when the sun comes up for me, and जैसे जैसे winters आ रही है, it's just becoming a more beautiful feeling for me. And even after the run, I like sitting. I try to take a bench in the park, and I like to spend. Because it's something one of the courses that I had done, she said that we spend so much of our time in AD mode, which is auditory digital because we're in our phones. And actually life should be spent up in visual. And for me, it has become that time that मैंने वो लगाना है in the visual, looking up, looking at the sky, looking at the sun, feeling the morning air. So I started even dropping it there. And now I'm completely comfortable because मुझे था कि इसकी आदत नहीं डालनी because sometimes it gets attached to your performance. And I didn't want to do that. And I was like, no, I'm going to spend time with myself. And like she said, the days that I find these guys on the track, then it becomes even easier because we're all talking. And even if I'm not talking, because I'm not too much of a talker, I love listening to these guys. Reena is very talkative. You can do like 2-3 hours with Reena because she has some story and some woe. And the community really, really helps. But sometimes when you're very tired and you're alone, then the music, I would say, does help because when you put those upbeat music, it does get you through that run.
I've seen you with headphones.
Yeah, so the
I caught you before you could even say anything.
the politically correct answer would be I've never used them in my life.
Yeah.
But that's not true. So I love music. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm not going to lie about this. This is, you can call it a failing, a weakness, whatever. Yes, they are not allowed in marathons, but I'm not running a marathon right now.
Yeah.
I'm running
Yeah.
in front of my house.
Yeah.
So I mean, it is something that is not advisable in traffic, but I still do it, and I shouldn't. But it's there's just something about running to Roxette, Michael Jackson. So I have this playlist, this 80s 90s playlist जो बचपन में मैं सुनता था, वो मैंने गाने लगाए हुए हैं उसके अंदर. तो वो बस it's something that I really enjoy. When I'm training hardcore, especially for a race where I'm really gunning for a time, I take them off. In the long run especially. Lekin generally throughout the year when I'm just aimlessly running around my neighborhood, I'll have my headphones on.
And when you're running without music, the two of you are, and when you're doing your long run, how do you deal with all sorts of thoughts that come into your head? There are all sorts of thoughts. There's great thoughts, there's terrible thoughts, there's thoughts that tell you कि यार रुक जाओ क्या फायदा, there's thoughts that remind you of your childhood trauma, there's all sorts of garbage that goes through. How do you process? Because that to me, that is actually the core of the run. Yeah. The body and eventually your body will get used to it and the muscles will get used to it and you put the miles and the distance, whatever. But it is that. If you can be in a state of bliss, I've been running for a while. Distance running मैं कम करता हूँ, but I've been running as 7 to 10 kilometers at least 2-3 times a week. I love sometimes when there is no thought. Zero. If you can be thoughtless and just run. Does that happen for you guys?
Actually, it does. When Mariam mentioned, and in fact, this entire last week, because I was doing that course, I couldn't do evenings. So me, herself, another friend, we said, okay, we're going to do this in the morning, And we were talking, but there were some moments because some runs were like tempo. So we had to do our own thing, our own pace, right? And I think they were very thoughtless because you were mindful about the time, but also it was so beautiful because the sunrise and the sunset is something that I've never paid attention to. And now I have. I love those thoughtless runs as well. But also, Faizan, I have to say, on those days when I have a lot of thoughts, I welcome them. Because, I remember something my father said to me, and in fact, all sisters, start enjoying your own company. And that's when I started sitting a lot alone, or I wouldn't feel awkward going to a cafe and just sitting, ordering a coffee or whatever. And those thoughts are so organic. They're so true. And it's funny because I'm doing a therapist course, so I don't want to therapize anybody, but yeah. But I think it's quite a nice time to be with yourself, with your thoughts. They help me also organize. Sometimes it's very structured also. What am I going to do today? What do I need to tackle? And it helps me get through the day. So I quite enjoy them.
How about you?
I love being with myself and with my thoughts. I'm somebody who would spend a lot of time with myself. In fact, मुझे तो लगता है that's quiet time when there are no kids, there's nobody, and it's just me and my thoughts. So I'm very, very comfortable. And like I said, I'm a high AD person. मेरा वो दिमाग उस तरह चलता है. So for me, if I can stop that and spend my life in visual, because even AD is the source of depression because it's overthinking, right? And it does affect your well-being. तो मैं अगर वो तस्बीह करती हूँ तो मैं वो thoughts भी रोक लेती हूँ. Because then I'm spending time there and I'm spending time in the visual. And for me, it's about how do I reduce the AD and spend more time in the V. So I'm personally going through that journey. And that is sort of helping me become more happier, just being with myself and not thinking. Because I'm always thinking. और मेरे अगर बहुत लोग कहते हैं कि ओ ये खामोश है, now she's in that thinking mode. Because that's just so like my style, right? And something I'm always in. So मुझे होता है कि वो रुक गई हैं तो बहुत अच्छी बात है. और वो रुकती हैं सुबह. I'm not thinking in the morning.
Good.
So, yeah.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah, so I mean, for me also, it's a lot of it's that part of the day where I'm not taking any calls. There's I'm one of the few people I think I don't know if there are other people that enjoy actually running alone, but I think I started for a long time. I was running alone, and it was so I enjoy the group dynamic, especially on the long runs, the conversational pace and whatever. But I also like to spend a lot of time just running on my own with no one else, just with my thoughts. So that is something that I truly enjoy. But quite honestly, with हमारे यहाँ इतना मनहूस मौसम होता है 8-9 महीने जनरली the thought है यार ये गर्मी है और मैं ये क्यों कर रहा हूँ but on the flip side when the weather gets better like it's going to get now inshallah December वगैरह then you start really enjoying the weather.
Yeah.
And there's a bit of mist in the air.
Yeah.
You're running through the mist. It's like you feel like you're in a movie.
Yeah.
Running. So you really enjoy the weather then. And
Yeah.
then you really become very thankful for this. These 2 or 3 months where we get weather because you know what's going to come after this.
That's true.
So yeah, that's. But more than that, it's really about just not really thinking about anything other, anything about, what's going to happen in the day or whatever. वो सारी चीजें कुछ भी नहीं. It's just filtering everything out, just focusing on this one activity that you're doing. You're doing it on your own. There's no other distractions. You're doing this. You're in tune with your body, and you're just. The goal is to finish 10 kilometers or 5 kilometers or do it at a certain pace. And that's the simplicity of that. Just that's the only goal you have in mind, and that for me that is very therapeutic. बस यही चीज़ अभी मुझे कुछ और नहीं सोचना है. मुझे सिर्फ ये सोचना है कि यार ये मुझे 10 किलोमीटर खत्म करना है या ये मुझे 15 किलोमीटर खत्म करने हैं और ये जब खत्म होंगे तो मुझे खुशी होगी. That's all it is.
True. Fascinating. I very inspiring to hear the stories that you guys have, especially for you to have been doing this for the first time. And Umair, you're a seasoned pro, and you're at it, continuous dedication towards it. I think that, the more people that are entering this, and I just heard from Shoaib that there's close to 200-300 people who are registered for the full run.
Yeah.
Which, let's say, compared to a couple of years ago, was nothing. I think that half marathon में मुश्किल से आपको 50-60 लोग मिलते थे.
बिल्कुल.
So the fact कि ये develop हो रहा है sport, the fact that people from all walks of life are picking up on it, 6-7 different running clubs बन गई हैं. I think that it's great, not just from a sport perspective or a community perspective. I also think there's a mental health component to this that people forget. अपने ख़यालात के साथ इंसान अगर वक्त गुजारे और अपने आप को टाइम दे तो वो एक बेहतर शख्स बनता है, ना सिर्फ अपने लिए लेकिन अपनी फैमिली और अपनी कम्युनिटी, अपने काम, हर एक के लिए। तो अगर हम एक थोड़ा सा वक्त निकाल के एक ऐसी एक्टिविटी में इन्वॉल्व करें अपने आप को जहाँ पे सबका फ़ायदा होगा, with our commitment to ourselves, I think that's a big plus we can do for everyone around us. So thank you. Keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you very much.
I'm gonna say fingers crossed. I'll try to join you guys on next Saturday for the half.
You sure?
Yes.
I will muster
going
up
to
the
be-
courage and just do it.
So the weather forecast is good.
Yeah,
so you should definitely.
the weather
come.
will be good.
I like how he's already checked for Saturday.
Yeah.
Constantly checking. Constantly checking.
No, no.
This is like
Yeah,
new
yeah,
level.
next level.
That's next level.
Next level. इन्होंने पूरे जैन का भी temperature
Each
निकाला
day
है.
as it comes.
So thank you guys for coming in and thank you for tuning in and watching. I hope the one message जो आप लोगों ने लिया हो is आप कोई भी हो, कहीं भी हो, क्या भी कुछ काम कर रहे हो, नहीं कर रहे हो, जो उम्र हो आपकी, ये एक ऐसी एक्टिविटी है जो कोई भी शुरू कर सकता है क्योंकि इसकी कम्युनिटी इतनी स्ट्रांग है कि वो आपको साथ लेके चलेंगे। तो चाहे आपने पहले ज़िंदगी में 1 किलोमीटर ना भागा हो या आपने 100 भागे हो, इट डजेंट मैटर। ये एक ऐसी एक्टिविटी है जो मैं ज़रूर कहूँगा ट्राई करें। मैराथन आ रहा है 5 जनवरी को। बेशक आप 5 किलोमीटर्स के लिए साइन अप कर लें या 10 के लिए साइन अप कर लें, लेकिन ज़रूर आएँ या साइन अप भी ना करें, आके देखें कि 200-250 लोग जो 42 किलोमीटर भागेंगे, how they experience the finish line. So it'll be a great activity to watch. We will see you there. Thank you for tuning in. Bye-bye.